said, no, we do not want to be forced medicated. 48 people said yes. Why did they pull it though? What they told me when I inquired was that some people had been voting multiple times. I inquired about this, and apparently you could, if you went onto the website more than 24 hours later, you could vote again. But if that's the case, therefore every single other poll they're doing as well should be invalidated. But apparently all those polls are still on the website, which begs the question, therefore, they didn't want to have the result. Why have they taken it off? Interesting enough, when you look at where they get their funding from, in part it is the Department of Health. Draw your own conclusions from that. But I think it's safe to say all their other polls presumably are invalid if this fluoride poll is invalid. But it comes back to the point, when people actually get the choice, they resoundingly say no.
And just to add on that as well, if you look at any of the polls, say in recent times, 12 or 24 months that I've been looking at, the data is pretty much the same. It's typically between 80 to 90% of people are against this notion. So why our particular poll in WA would be of any question is, well, it's questionable. The next slide, I'd like to refer to Dr. Phyllis Mullinex from the US. She's a PhD in pharmacology and environmental medicine, and also based on her presentation, which is very, I think, very interesting. If you look at what the pro-fluoridation people will say about fluoridation, it's in fact, first of all, dismiss, they'll deny, and distort the evidence, and that's a 3D diagnosis of chronic fluoride poisoning. So they'll dismiss the dental fluorosis cosmetic-only effect. As we've mentioned before, teeth erupt from the bones, primarily, and that's where it comes from. And as you fluoridate yourself every day, supposedly washing the teeth with saliva and it has a content of fluoride, the whole body is being washed with this all day, every day. So that can't have a cosmetic-only effect because we know that fluoride affects the body in many other ways. It's not questionable by any serious scientists. Then they'll deny that existence of soft tissue. I mean, dentists would like to see us as just teeth. It's beautiful. Just add more of this stuff. Clearly, it's not that. And then they'll distort the bone effects, this osteosclerosis, so any arthritic issues, they'll just say, oh, it's just arthritis. We're not sure, and again, I'm not quite sure. Any test that are unconclusive, they'll leave it at that. And that's my experience that I'm talking about. I'm not sure that any of yours that might be experiencing similar conditions.
And health authorities are always warning there is a massive upsurge in osteoporosis symptoms in our society. But is it all osteoporosis or are there other issues as well, particularly skeletal fluorosis, which is the same effects as dental fluorosis on the internals?
That being the point, that even though I'm medicated, and yes, it is medication, whoever argues with the point doesn't understand that this is a preventative medicine. We are being medicated as a prevention to decay. By definition, it is medicine. So we are being medicated without actually follow-up tests, so no one knows what the result is. And myself, just through my curiosity with my condition, I've been pushing for this just to find out for myself. I wasn't trying to go against fluoride. I just wanted to know all these symptoms. How about this one? It turns out that I've got more. So does anyone of you know your particular result? Do you know how much fluoride you have in your system? Anybody had any tests? That's the point. No hands up. Now, next slide. It's from the ABC News where there was an incident near the smelter, Alcoa smelter, Aluminium smelter, and kangaroos were eating vegetation around that smelter for some time. This is not a single case event. It didn't just happen. For some time they were eating this vegetation and they ended up with lesions on their bones. So I'm trying to speak in the mic. Lesions on the bones, which made them lame, and there was a big issue. And it has been investigated. The University of Melbourne actually looked into this, and they discovered that these kangaroos had prolific issues with dental fluorosis and skeletal fluorosis. That's the actual name for it. Yet in the media report, of course, they'll just call it lesions on the bones. It's mystical, lesions on the bones. Skeletal fluorosis, we look up at the study about this, and that's what it was. These poor little creatures have been killed off by fluoride. James, do you want to talk about this one?
Now, there are numerous adverse health effects, numerous. But I think one of the most scandalous is this, that you are medicating unborn children long before they have any teeth. They are ingesting fluoride through their mother's umbilical cord. And it's, as it clearly says there, water is for everyone, fluoride is not. Now this would be okay if there was absolutely no dangers. However, there are potential dangers, and it's not just us saying it. There are numerous studies which have all shown an adverse effect. One Chinese study quite recently showed that children who had high levels of fluoride in their diet had an IQ of 8 points lower than children who were unfluoridated. 8 IQ points lower. Absolute scandal. And all these studies are happening. But you know what our local health authorities say? Oh, these are Chinese studies, these are Indian studies, these are Iranian studies, these are from foreign countries, they're different. Well, I'm sorry, but they're not. They're physically the same as us, and their intakes are pretty much the same as us as well. And if there are 36 peer-reviewed studies saying that fluoride is interfering with the blood-brain barrier and children's IQ development, and Harvard released a study last year which did exactly that. Harvard University is not some conspiracy theorist hotbed. It is one of the most respected universities in the world. And Harvard scientists said there is a connection between fluoride intake and IQ. Why the hell is it still happening here today? And our health authorities completely ignore this. If there is any potential danger to any single person in our community, surely it must stop. You can't keep going if there is potential danger, because there is no lockdowns. And if it's happening to our children, even before they're born, that is an absolute scandal. But it's not just fluoride IQ. And please, again, don't take our word for this.
The next slide, I just want to present a little movie from a doctor's perspective.
Hi, I'm Dr. Yolanda White. I'm a primary care pediatrician who no longer supports water fluoridation. Pediatricians like myself are taught to pay very close attention to the proper weight-based dosage for each drug, and to make sure that our patients do not receive more of a drug than is necessary or safe. But unfortunately, when it comes to fluoride, this basic precaution is not being followed. In fact, the dose of fluoride that's supposedly effective in preventing dental cavities is very close to the dose that, according to the Environmental Protection Agency, can cause harm for some children. So it has a very narrow therapeutic window. Since children now receive fluoride from so many different sources, it's virtually impossible for a doctor to determine exactly how much fluoride each child is actually getting. And if you can't determine the amount of fluoride, then you can't determine the dose. And if you can't determine the dose of fluoride, then you can't determine safety. As a pediatrician, I am deeply concerned that fluoride is not good for babies and that they are at risk for harmful side effects. The most clearly visible side effect is dental fluorosis, a permanent staining of the teeth caused by fluoride's interference with normal tooth development. There's a significant number of children in the United States who now have some form of dental fluorosis. According to the Centers for Disease Control, dental fluorosis affects 41% of teenagers. That's millions of children who now have a visible form of chronic fluoride toxicity. As a pediatrician, I'm concerned that fluoride could also affect tissues and organs that are not visible, like the bones, the thyroid, and the brain. My concern is based in part on a large body of research finding that modestly elevated levels of fluoride can reduce a child's intelligence, especially if there's a deficient intake of iodine. Children are disproportionately affected by fluoride for several key reasons. They receive a greater fluoride dose per body weight when compared to adults. They have far more fluoride incorporated into their skeleton than adults. They have a lower kidney excretion of fluoride into their urine, meaning more fluoride gets reabsorbed back into their bloodstream where it can bioaccumulate. And their developing brains are more susceptible to fluoride's toxicity. This can affect their educational achievement. And these unique characteristics of children can no longer be ignored. I'm also concerned by research findings showing that dental fluorosis is higher in the Black community, even the more severe forms, where the teeth can start to erode and develop black and brown stains. This health disparity and environmental injustice will need to be addressed. Even though federal agencies recommended lowering fluoride concentration in water down to 0.7 parts per million, that reduction is slow to implement in each jurisdiction, and frankly, it's not enough. Over-the-counter water filters can't remove the fluoride. So my heart goes out to pregnant women, seniors, those with kidney, thyroid, and other health conditions who can't afford a water purification process to remove the fluoride. They shouldn't even be put in this position. Because water is for everyone, but fluoride is not. Therefore, it's my professional recommendation that we discontinue water fluoridation in the United States. I know I don't want to drink fluoridated water, and I commend residents of Portland, Oregon for fighting hard for the right to keep fluoride out of their water, and also states like New Hampshire and cities like Milwaukee for including infant advisories on their water bills. This past May, New York City held their first children's anti-fluoride rally. Sooner or later, you too will have to make some very important decisions about fluoride. And so it's better to be safe and responsible now so we won't have to pay for it later. It's all about prevention. Thank you.
Obviously that was the American perspective. The same issues here, exactly the same issues here. We're physically the same, we're drinking the same, if not more, higher levels of fluoride in our diets. There is very little research which shows differences between different ethnic groups as well. There is a little bit of research which we've seen which shows Aboriginal people are affected more severely. There's higher rates of dental fluorosis in Aboriginal communities. So why is this happening? But it's not just IQ, and it's not just dental fluorosis. These are just some of the studies, hundreds of studies, which are out there. Peer-reviewed journals, which are showing adverse effects.
In the interest of time, I'm going to skip through those, of course. There's plenty of this information on our website and links to those particular studies. But also referring to Dr. Yolanda's speech there, of course, she was referring to America specifically, but you must be aware that we are not the pioneers in this. If anything, we're on the tail end of it. The whole world is giving this up, especially comparing to Europe, which is where I come from myself. Our place wasn't fluoridated, but some places have tried to actually put the practice on, and they found all these issues with it, and they retracted from the practice. It's not that people are not fluoridated because it hasn't got to them yet. They're actually giving up this practice, and they're dropping like a hot potato at the moment. Thank goodness Queensland's waking up, but why the hell before us? You know? So looking at other issues, of course, you've got reproductive systems being affected. There's studies there as well. Heart disease.
And this is the second biggest killer in WA, is heart disease. But unfortunately, this also demonstrates, this particular study, we brought this up with the West Australian newspaper, their health editor. And you know what she said to me? Is there a WA angle I can put into the article? It's the second biggest killer in WA, but apparently that wasn't good enough. So they decided not to run with any news story about that particular issue. And osteosarcoma is a particularly nasty disease. Mainly affects boys, and it's a cancer of the bone, and it's horrendous. Now, it is a very rare cancer, but it is still being linked to fluoride exposure. Now, if one child gets this because of excess fluoride exposure because of our drinking water, that is wrong. It's another reason why this has got to stop. And it's not just us being affected, it's the wider environment. As we showed before, you could not dump this stuff in the river supplies normally, or in the sea, because it adversely affects animals. We've already seen the kangaroos, they've got amphibians from the World Wildlife Fund. In Canada, they say it should be 0.12, so that's 10 times less than our fluoride at the moment. And when it goes out your tap, it goes down the drain, it goes into the wider environment. So we are literally polluting the environment with industrial waste, just very, very diluted. Doesn't make it any better, still going to have adverse effects. And the other bizarre thing is, this is a monumentally ridiculous way of medicating a population, because less than 1%, around 0.5% of all your water consumed goes into your mouth. You are fluoridating your toilet, you're fluoridating your swimming pool, you're fluoridating your grass, you're fluoridating your dishes. I'm sure they've all got lovely teeth themselves. But how ridiculous is that? I mean, it's like the criminal saying, we're going to build a brand new hospital, and then at the end of the process, all they have is front doors. There's no hospital, just the front doors. Monumentally inefficient. This is from New Zealand, an activist from New Zealand, just explaining just how ridiculous this is.
So I'm going to present two arguments where for the discontinuing of fluoridation.